Welcome to Holistic Answers to Mental Health with your host, Aileen Neely. In this program, you will understand the alternative mental health techniques that are being utilized to help you overcome stress, depression, anxiety, and so much more. Now, here's your host, Aileen Neely.
Welcome to Holistic Answers to Mental Health. This is your host, Aileen Neely. And for all of you listeners who have been tuning into Holistic Answers to Mental Health, you have heard me refer to energy psychology on numerous occasions. I have interviewed many authors and practitioners of energy psychology as it pertains to specific conditions. What you may not know is that most of those authors, as well as myself, have been through the certification process to become diplomats in comprehensive energy psychology, which is honored by the Association of Comprehensive Energy Psychology. Well, most of the theoretical portion of this certification process came from a book entitled Energy Psychology Interactive, Rapid Interventions for Lasting Change. In fact, this book became my Bible, so to speak, while getting through all of the written exams and continues to be one of my main reference tools while practicing energy psychology. I cannot be more thrilled to have the opportunity to interview the author of this book and 7 others. He is a clinical psychologist who has served on the faculties of the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine and Antioch College. He has been a pioneer in innovative approaches to treating post-traumatic stress disorder, and his books have been translated into 15 languages and have earned 8 national awards, including the U.S. Book News Best Psychology Mental Health Book in 2007. A very warm welcome to Dr. David Feinstein.
Thank you so much, Aileen.
It is so wonderful to have you. It is indeed an honor, actually, to have you on Holistic Answers to Mental Health. And without delay, why don't we begin talking about the fascinating world of energy psychology, and what is energy psychology?
Energy psychology is a relatively new and yet very ancient way of working with emotions and with the person's inner life. It is new in that it is only since the early 1980s that this approach entered into clinical psychology.
Okay.
Yet it draws from ancient principles of healing, going back to acupuncture, acupressure, yoga, qigong, tai chi, and in pulling an understanding of the body as an energy system and the way that the subtle energies that affect our thinking, affect our moods, affect our brains can be worked with directly. It bypasses the need for some of the more laborious processes that are part of psychotherapy. And so it becomes sort of like a designer tool that the therapist can use, but we've also found that people can apply it for themselves with a great deal of effectiveness. There's certainly a role for the psychotherapist in working with conditions that are more severe, but it's become a wonderful tool for the self-management of one's own emotions. If one is feeling anxious before speaking in front of an audience, if one is wanting to get their best performance before they get on the tennis court, they have some simple, surprisingly simple tools for bringing out their best, for overcoming their fears and anxieties. So it's an exciting development within the mental health field.
Absolutely, to say the least. And as a practitioner myself, I have seen tremendous success when it comes to individuals who really hands-on practice this periodically within their lives on different levels, as you explained, from the simplest of areas of day-to-day overcoming issues to the more complex and certainly disordered areas within one's life. Now, if you can give me a scenario of how can energy psychology actually improve a person's life overall?
There's many answers to that question. It's a good question. From whatever patterns you notice in your life that that really get in your way, they can be addressed, such as I recently worked with a man who was in a second marriage and was helping to bring up the children from the first marriage, and was really enjoying the role. The children's father would visit from time to time, and whenever he would come in to pick up the kids and interact with his former wife, this man became insanely jealous. It was just over the top, even though he knew the relationship was over. He knew he understood all that. He had a very strong reaction that he didn't really understand, but it was so emotional that he didn't even want to understand it. It was
Got it.
He kind of vilified this other man, and it was getting to be a problem. And so with just one session, that was able to be transformed. And the way that it was transformed was to start with having him bring to mind the reaction inside of him the last time that this man had shown up. And while bringing that to mind and feeling the emotion, the jealousy, we began to have him tap on a set of about a dozen acupuncture points.
Okay.
And when you tap on these points, when you stimulate them, it sends a message to the brain that has a calming effect. It deactivates the distress response, so that after a round of tapping about a dozen times and a few other physical procedures, such as counting and humming and rolling his eyes in a particular way, the rating that he gave the feeling of jealousy when he brought that scene to mind had gone from a 10 down to an 8. And then we did it again, and it went down to a 7. And then we did it again, and it didn't move. And so when that happens, you have something that is more complex than simply the situation at hand. And what often happens, though, is when you take some of the edge off of the situation, an understanding will come up. And he suddenly remembered how there was a period of time in his childhood where his parents took in a foster child. And this foster child got all the attention. And it was quite difficult for him during that period where he felt like he wasn't really loved by his parents. It wasn't true, but that was his experience as a child. And that had never really been resolved or healed, nor did he really remember it. It wasn't something that he thought about, once a year or something like that. It was just back there. And as that emerged as really being unhealed and a source of real pain for him, we could go to that. And we did just about 3 rounds on that and got it from a 10 to a 0. And then we went back to the father of the children that he was raising, and it almost instantly went down to a 0. So for him, in the space of half an hour, this issue that was really getting in the way of his family, causing him a lot of distress, was gone. And in the next visits, it just wasn't there. And he was able to establish, actually now, a healthy relationship with this man, which served his family and served his kids for that to occur. So it was that block that he could not talk himself out of, could not think himself out of. He did not know how to change it. It made him feel really bad about himself. He was a good man, but it just was a strong reaction that caused him to behave in a way that he didn't like and no one else liked, and that was causing him some real difficulty. So that scenario represents what you can do with energy psychology with everyday problems that all of us face. All of us have our own areas of fear, our own anxieties, our own hang-ups, our own places that we have irrational anger or are unable to let go of something that we have lost, so we have grief that just kind of perpetuates itself. All of those kinds of issues, the more or less garden variety of everyday emotional problems, respond very well to this.
So I'm sorry. So what you're saying...
When we get into more severe problems, you really need a therapist. But for a lot of the everyday problems, once you learn the method, you can do a lot with yourself. And we teach people to recognize when they do need professional help. So go ahead. I'm sorry I cut you off there.
Oh, no, that's okay. And what you're saying is essentially that there tends to be, is it 100% or sometimes this unconscious underlying issue that is correlated with the present difficulty?
It's a very good question. Sometimes you don't need to go there at all. Okay. Sometimes there is a fear of driving. Say a person feels really uncomfortable in the car, and they don't know when it started. It started gradually and just kept getting worse. And you begin to tap on it, and it goes from an 8 to a 5 to a 2 to a 0, and then you have them imagine driving in the car, and they're able to visualize themselves as having no anxiety driving, and you work with them to get that vision to be very highly believable, and then they go off into a car and drive, and they're fine. That happens some of the time where there's no past issue that needs to be addressed.
Right.
Other times, and often, I can't really give you a good proportion because the ones that I see are often tougher ones. The person has already tried to work it out themselves, and they haven't been able to, so that's why they would seek a professional's help.
Right.
And with those, it's usually not so simple as just tapping on the issue and having the issue go away. You're more likely to be involved with more complex dynamics.
Understood. Okay. And then I wanted to also clarify for listeners, when you are referring to when you're tapping going down from 10 to 8 to 7, can you explain what that is all about?
Yes. Yes. Since the 1950s, psychology has had a very quick measure, a subjective measure of internal distress, and it's called a SUD, or subjective units of distress. And it's simply going into the feeling, like for the man who was feeling the jealousy, he would imagine the other man showing up, and he would close his eyes and go into that fantasy and identify the amount of distress that he felt in his body or mind. And it might be an emotion that comes up, it might be a tightness in his chest, it might be any signals of distress, and he would give that a rating from 0, meaning no distress at all, to 10, meaning this is about as distressful, as difficult as this emotion could become.
All right, and that sounds very similar to when even a traditional doctor will ask you on a scale of 0 to 10 in terms of pain. Where are you at? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Exactly.
Great. All right. Well, we will be back after these short messages. Please stay tuned, and we will continue our fascinating world of energy psychology with Dr. David Feinstein.
Listen. The world is talking. The World Talk Radio Variety Channel.
The field of psychology is in constant evolution. We are moving towards a much more integrative approach that brings faster results and is more considerate to your pocket. Plus, with energy psychology techniques on the rise, you can have your sessions and treatment over the phone. Distance is no longer an issue. Hi, my name is Aileen Neely, and I am a licensed psychotherapist and certified energy practitioner. What I present to each of my clients is far from a quick fix. My intention is for each client to clear their issues from the root of the problem and provide them with tools they can utilize for life. If you are genuinely ready to create real change for yourself and become you at your greatest, seek no more. Visit my website at aileenneelytherapies.com for a list of products, services, and workshops, or call today for a free consultation at 661-510-0219. I am ready to help you if you are ready to help yourself.
Are you one of the 64% of U.S. adults that are afraid to be in deep, open water? Did you know that almost half of all Americans are not able to swim in pools? Millions of Americans have taken swimming lessons and still have not learned to swim. Mellon Dash is going to change all of that. Tune in to the Learn to Swim Show, a program that helps adults learn to swim. You'll find out why it's different than teaching a child and how simple it can be. Tune in to the Learn to Swim Show, Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Pacific on the World Talk Radio Variety Channel. Can you think of anybody who does not want a better life and to be a better person? Think about that for a second. Almost everyone wants to be better, but how does one go about doing that? One thing that is making people better every week is tuning in to the Self-Improvement Show with Dr. Irene Conlon. All real change comes from within, but many of us don't know where to find the information or guidance we need to make the changes that bring about the improvement. Most of us don't know how to work within. Listen Thursdays at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern on World Talk Radio Variety. You're listening to the World Talk Radio Variety Channel. You are listening to Holistic Answers to Mental Health. Your host is Aileen Neely. To participate in the discussion this week, please call 1-866-613-1612. That's 1-866-613-1612. You may also send an email to aneely@aileenneelytherapies.com. Now back to Holistic Answers to Mental Health.
Welcome back. We are talking today to Dr. David Feinstein, author of The Promise of Energy Psychology, Revolutionary Tools for Dramatic Personal Change. And before we stopped for break, we were talking a little bit about different examples of how energy psychology has been applied with specific clients and such. And the follow-up question would be then, are there any specific problems that are more successfully approachable when it comes to energy psychology tools, and then vice versa? Are there any specific conditions that wouldn't necessarily function well with energy psychology?
The research is very preliminary. Even though energy psychology has been around since the early 1980s, it took almost 3 decades for serious research to start to be conducted, and there's a variety of reasons for that. The academic community still doesn't really recognize it's just starting to. Mm-hmm. And only in the last 5 or 6 years has there started to be a plethora of research. And the the studies that are available suggest that energy psychology is particularly effective with anxiety-based disorders, such as fears, phobias, generalized anxiety disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, that whole range of issues that are based on the amygdala, a part of the brain that deals with threat. The amygdala going into a stress response when the circumstances do not really allow for that. So in terms of research, and I have to answer your question first, in terms of what's available, that is what is starting to be well established.
Got it.
In terms of what people are finding, they are, as I was saying earlier, finding very, very strong success with the garden variety emotional problems that people face every day: anxieties, jealousies, anger, depression, etc. For more complex conditions like an addiction or borderline personality disorder,
right,
or obsessive compulsive disorders, the energy psychology turns out that tapping on acupuncture points turns out to be a very powerful tool that the clinician can use, but the clinician would not throw out anything else that works with these disorders. So, for instance, if the person has a gambling problem, you would have a tool where you could look at the roots of the gambling problem. Say that maybe the person was in their childhood, there was a parent who did a lot of gambling, and that kind of got imprinted on the child. Or there were a lot of situations that were high risk, and that whole paradigm of taking high risks was imprinted on the child. You can begin to work with those using the tapping, and begin to change some of those. You can also look at the cues in the person's current life that cause an impulse for gambling. Like every time they drive by a casino that's well lighted, they have an urge to gamble. You can actually begin to focus on that image of the casino and decrease the amount of emotional response to that cue. You can give the person a tool that they can use back home, which is one of the great strengths of energy psychology, is that the therapist uses it in the office, but can also, for instance, with the gambler, give the person a tool that whenever they are feeling the impulse to gamble, they can tap on that feeling, on that impulse, and it sends messages to the brain, electrochemical impulses to the brain that decrease that impulse. So it can be used at all those levels. However, you would still, as a clinician, perhaps refer the person to Gamblers Anonymous so that they have social support. You would still perhaps make a contract so that they, during the time that they're in treatment, don't have access to their bank account, so that someone else that they trust has access, so that if they go off the wagon, so to speak, they don't destroy themselves. You can make contracts that they not go to places that are very tempting. Like you might make a contract that they not go to watch the horses race one another. So you don't throw. You might, if you're more psychodynamically oriented, you might really explore in depth their relationship with their parents' childhood incidents more than just what comes up spontaneously during the tapping. So you would use everything you know, and that's true for a whole range of more complex psychological conditions, from working with different personality disorders, working with addictions, that level. Now, there are other issues that are much harder. I don't know of anyone using tapping to cure schizophrenia, to cure bipolar disorder, to cure deep endogenous depression that clearly has a strong biological basis. However, you can use tapping to help schizophrenics or people with bipolar disorder to cope with their disorder more effectively. And you'd use that in the way that you would help anyone else to cope with the challenges in their life. So it can still be helpful, but it's not. The experience so far has been that we don't know how to use the energy work to cure these disorders. But I'll tell one brief story that sort of woke me up to being conservative about what I say. I was on a research panel at one of the ASEP, Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology, the organization you mentioned earlier. I was at a research panel at one of their annual conferences, and I made the statement that I just made, but I also included in there multiple personality disorder, which is called dissociative identity disorder in the psychiatric manual. I said that it will not help with that. And a woman in the audience was furious that I said that, raised her hands, and really gave me a piece of her mind that I was making a statement like that publicly without having done my homework, because the clinic that she works at specializes in dissociative identity disorder, and it's a very tough condition to treat. It's usually almost always brought about by severe abuse in childhood, and it's a way of coping, of dissociating, so the person really takes on multiple personalities, and these are discrete ego states that don't even know that the others existed sometimes. So the person is totally in this character, and then will shift to another character, and it's very disruptive, obviously, for the family, for the person. And it was taking them 5 years to really work with the person intensely before they could turn this around. And after they adopted the energy cycle, according to this woman, they were able to get the same results in 2 years. So it's still a very intensive therapy, and it's not a magic wand, but it greatly increased the effectiveness. So to summarize that long answer to your very good question,
that's all right.
there are a range of anxiety-based disorders and everyday problems that the tapping on acupuncture point seems to be very effective with. There's a mid-range of problems that are more complex, like addictions and personality disorders, where you use, as a clinician, you use everything else that you know. And then there is another range of more biologically based disorders where we've not yet seen cures, although we can help people to cope.
Correct. So basically, in summary, for listeners out there, what I'm hearing is that it's still, regardless of whether or not we're looking at a cure per se, it is still beneficial in all scenarios, be it that it's just a simple relief of the stress that may accompany some of the more critical disorders, to simply learning coping skills to overcome the day-to-day stressors of the condition itself, and then, of course, looking at anxiety-based conditions as one of the most easiest ones to treat with these tools.
That's very well stated, and you use the word stress, and that's such an important component of many of these disorders. So when you work with someone who has schizophrenia, and you are able to enhance their self-esteem, and you are able to help them cope with some of the social challenges that they're faced with, so that they feel less stress, they have less symptoms. So we have been able to document in case studies. There has not been a actual systematic study, but there are numerous case reports now where schizophrenics who are helped with coping wind up having fewer hallucinations.
Lovely.
So it actually helps with the symptoms. They're still schizophrenic. They still have the brain chemistry of the disorder, but the coping and the symptoms reduce.
Very, very nice. Well, we will be back after these very important messages. Do stay tuned with Dr. David Feinstein coming up soon.
The World Talk Radio Variety Channel, where the world comes to talk.
The field of psychology is in constant evolution. We are moving towards a much more integrative approach that brings faster results and is more considerate to your pocket. Plus, with energy psychology techniques on the rise, you can have your sessions and treatment over the phone. Distance is no longer an issue. Hi, my name is Aileen Neely, and I am a licensed psychotherapist and certified energy practitioner. What I present to each of my clients is far from a quick fix. My intention is for each client to clear their issues from the root of the problem and provide them with tools they can utilize for life. If you are genuinely ready to create real change for yourself and become you at your greatest, seek no more. Visit my website at aileenneelytherapies.com for a list of products, services, and workshops, or call today for a free consultation at 661-510-0219. I am ready to help you if you are ready to help yourself.
Are you looking for tips, tricks, secrets, and techniques that you can use anywhere, anytime, on virtually any problem? Tune in to Magic at Your Fingertips with EFT virtuoso Teresa Bolin. You are a divine manifestation of love and light. Take back control of your life and create the life that you want using EFT, Emotional Freedom Techniques. You'll overcome the obstacles that stand in the way of living your heart's desire. Magic at Your Fingertips airs live at 6 a.m. U.S. Pacific Time, 9 a.m. Eastern, and 10 p.m. in Japan on the World Talk Radio Variety Channel.
Cotton Radio is a unique program designed for leaders in apparel and retail businesses and college students. Our program will take you inside the cotton industry, including production, design, and engineering of cotton fabrics, innovative uses for cotton, and marketing and merchandising products that have made cotton the fiber of choice. Your hosts are Philadelphia University professors Stephen Frumpkin, Natalie Nixon, and Nyoka Wyatt. Tune in to Cotton Radio on the World Talk Radio Variety Channel, Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern and 9 a.m. Pacific, and rebroadcast weekly on the Voice America Business Channel.
The World Talk Radio Variety Channel. You are listening to Holistic Answers to Mental Health. Your host is Aileen Neely. To participate in the discussion this week, please call 1-866-613-1612. That's 1-866-613-1612. You may also send an email to aneely@aileenneelytherapies.com. Now back to Holistic Answers to Mental Health.
Welcome back. Today we are talking to Dr. David Feinstein, author of The Promise of Energy Psychology, Revolutionary Tools for Dramatic Personal Change. And as we continue our talk about the treatment of energy psychology, I wonder if we can look at the areas that seem a little bit more difficult, such as, I'm guessing, when a treatment doesn't necessarily move as smoothly, we may have to look into other areas prior to continuing the energy psychology work. So I know that there is such a thing as psychological reversals, as dealing with resistance. Can we take one at a time, Dr. Feinstein, and talk a little bit about what perhaps are psychological reversals and how can those be cleared?
Yes, psychological reversal is a term that Roger Callahan coined. He was the first psychologist to begin tapping on energy points, on acupuncture points, to address emotional issues. And he found that sometimes the client has an internal conflict about overcoming the problem. So the person is wanting to, like the man that I talked about with the jealousies, he's wanting to overcome that jealousy, but there's a part of him that believes that if he isn't feeling the jealousy, then he's not safe. Then the other man is going to be able to do harm to his family. And so the what's being presented is, I want to get over this jealousy, but inside there's a conflict about it. So it's a psychological reversal is an internal conflict about overcoming the problem. And an example that was kind of an amusing one was a woman who had a fear of flying, and it was like an 8 to start with, and went through a round of tapping and went down a little bit, it wouldn't go down further. So when it's at a 5 and stuck at a 5, and you begin to fish around a little bit to get a sense of what else might be going on. And so I asked her, how would your life be different if you didn't have your fear of flying?
Uh-huh.
I said, oh, well, then I wouldn't have to go on those dreadful business trips with my husband.
Uh-huh.
So that opened up a whole other topic to explore, which was that if she didn't have her phobia, she would have to go on these business trips, which she hates.
Right.
And how does she deal with that? Does she want to? One option would be to just leave the phobia alone because it's working, it's doing something she needs. Another would be to work with her marriage so that she can state her desires and have some autonomy about what she does, and it might be assertiveness training that she's needing, but at any case, once you identify the psychological reversal, then there is a choice
Right.
of what way to go. The most common way, because usually the psychological reversal is simply less important to the person than overcoming the goal once they identify it, and so you can work directly with the psychological reversal. And there's a very clever protocol for doing that.
Okay.
And the way that's done is language like this. Even though, and then you name the problem that is in the way, and then you follow it with a positive statement. So even though I don't really want to get over my fear of flying, would be the setup for that, and then the second half might be a self-affirming statement, such as I deeply and completely accept myself.
Right.
Or it might emphasize a choice that the person has in the matter. So even though I don't really want to get over my fear of flying, I choose to have more influence on what happens in my life. Or I choose to be able to tell my husband that I don't want to go on these trips.
Right.
So that you are associating the problem with a positive outcome. And while you make that statement, you are rubbing certain points on the body, energy points. They're called neurolymphatic points, where energy tends to get clogged. And by rubbing ones that have a little bit of tenderness, it breaks up the block, and so energy gets released as you're making this statement. So it gives the statement more power. So that is seems overly simplistic way, but very effective, I have found, in addressing these psychological reversals in a manner that allows the person to move on with the work. It's not necessarily that just those simple statements have resolved the psychological reversal, but it's at least put it on the back shelf enough that it's not interfering with working on the fear of flying.
Got it. Lovely. So would we say then that psychological reversals are synonymous to resistance?
Well, there's a number of kinds of resistance, and that is certainly one of them. So an unconscious conflict, a conflict the person is not aware of. There's also more straightforward resistance, where the person is there like someone who has been referred because they have the choice from their probation officer of getting into therapy or going back to prison.
Got it.
And so you have other kinds of resistance. You also have psychological reversals that the person is more a victim of the situation, like if they are on disability insurance for their emotional disorders, and they overcome the emotional disorder, they lose their financial support. They have a psychological reversal that is very, very, very much dictated by the circumstances of their life rather than an internal conflict. Another form of resistance, or resistance is a term that sort of makes it sound like the client is not cooperating.
Right.
But a lot of resistance looks like that, but it's not that at all. What's happening is that something from the person's past is interfering with getting this done. The example of the man with the jealousy, who in his childhood there was the foster kids that got all the attention that rooted to it. A man who had a minor automobile accident, and after it he was afraid to drive. He just had great anxiety whenever he'd get behind the wheel. Came and it kind of tapped down from a 10 to a 7 quite rapidly, but then wouldn't go any further. And what came up, though, in talking about what else might be going on was a memory he hadn't remembered for decades. That when he was a child, he had witnessed a really bad automobile accident, and that had never gotten processed. But even though he wasn't in it, it was very traumatic to see blood and injuries, and that was just sitting in his psyche for all these decades, and the accident that he had activated it. It still didn't get it quite up to his memory, but it activated it. So it was infiltrating into every time he got behind the wheel. Once it came into his awareness, it made it quite easy to work with it, with the tapping, so that he was able to remember the scene without the emotional arousal. That's what the tapping really does, is that you don't forget what happened, but you are able to visit it in your memory without cortisol getting pumped through your bloodstream, without the whole stress reaction being relived. So once he was able to have the memory without a physiological response, then the fear of driving, the current fear, was very, very readily went down to zero.
Lovely, lovely. Yeah, and I think that one of the things that I have encountered myself, if I may, as a practitioner, is sometimes when I am working with a patient who is indeed experiencing some of this resistance, it's very unconscious. So if it's presented in that way, normally they get very defensive. It's like, of course I want to get over this. Why wouldn't I? But it's a lot more. It's a lot deeper than that. And once they're able to tap into that, and it becomes conscious, then they understand it, and it's easily cleared because they can sail through it.
Exactly. So you partner with them in becoming an interested investigator.
Exactly. I like that.
Yes.
Very nice. Well, I would like to start with this, and we may not have time to cover it before our next break, but I would love to know if energy psychology is something that can work with children, and how can we actually, what would that approach look like in treating a child?
Yes, children are extremely responsive to this. Their energies are just so lovely and have so much life to them, and they are so flexible in their ways of understanding the world. So they'll make up a story about themselves based on something difficult that happened to them, and if you review what happened, and they're very ready to change the story to bring in a more positive story. So a child who has been bullied may begin to believe that I'm a very weak person. I'm not as good as the other kids. I deserve to be beat up. All those stories begin to become their reality, and if you can help them to work with the trauma of having been bullied, then everything else, all the stories can change as well, and they actually then become more able to take the steps that they need to take to get protection against being bullied. So they're able to cope with the situation, but also their self-concept begins to shift when the bullying has really damaged their self-concept. So you're able to do a great deal in very small amount of time. The most exciting ways I think that these techniques can be taught to kids is not in the therapist's office, but in the way that they can be taught to manage their own fears and angers and hurts, so that they learn to tap on themselves when they are feeling frightened or when they're feeling unsure, so that they have a tool in their back pocket that I think it's as important to teach this as it is to teach them how to brush their teeth.
Absolutely. Dr. Feinstein, yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt. We have to break for commercials, but we will be back and discussing this further in terms of treating children with energy psychology. Stay tuned.
The World Talk Radio Variety Channel, where the world comes to listen and talk.
The field of psychology is in constant evolution. We are moving towards a much more integrative approach that brings faster results and is more considerate to your pocket. Plus, with energy psychology techniques on the rise, you can have your sessions and treatment over the phone. Distance is no longer an issue. Hi, my name is Aileen Neely, and I am a licensed psychotherapist and certified energy practitioner. What I present to each of my clients is far from a quick fix. My intention is for each client to clear their issues from the root of the problem and provide them with tools they can utilize for life. If you are genuinely ready to create real change for yourself and become you at your greatest, seek no more. Visit my website at aileenneelytherapies.com for a list of products, services, and workshops, or call today for a free consultation at 661-510-0219. I am ready to help you if you are ready to help yourself.
In Sue McDaniel's book, I Am Heart, she talks about feelings. Now, Sue is ready to bring her book, blogs, and topics of interest to the World Talk Radio Variety Channel. I Am Heart will discuss concepts and ideas that affect all of us and will provide experts and solutions to help everyone. Sue, speaking through I Am Heart, will answer your questions, share your answers, and learn together with you. Each program will have topics you've suggested, homework to learn about yourself, and moments of connection. Tune in to I Am Heart, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific on World Talk Radio Variety.
Listen. The world is talking. The World Talk Radio Variety Channel. You are listening to Holistic Answers to Mental Health. Your host is Aileen Neely. To participate in the discussion this week, please call 1-866-613-1612. That's 1-866-613-1612. You may also send an email to aneely@aileenneelytherapies.com. Now back to Holistic Answers to Mental Health.
Welcome back. Today we are talking to Dr. David Feinstein, author of The Promise of Energy Psychology, Revolutionary Tools for Dramatic Personal Change. And prior to parting for break, we were discussing the utilization of energy psychology as it pertains to treating children. And Dr. Feinstein was about to share with us a story about this particular scenario.
Yes, one of the really surprising and very, very important applications of energy psychology has been to people that have been recently or in the past severely traumatized and have post-traumatic stress disorder. So there are teams that are going out to trouble spots in the world and working with some of the most difficult situations you can imagine. People who have been part of victims of ethnic cleansing, victims of warfare, victims of tsunami and other natural disasters. And there is a orphanage in Rwanda where that has 400 children, and 188 of them could remember, this was in 2006, could remember the ethnic cleansing of a decade earlier. Many of them had lost their parents, seen their parents slaughtered, and the team that worked with thought field therapy which is a variation of energy psychology, the Roger Callahan's, worked with the 50 children that were the most damaged, and they only were able to give them one session, and but it was a study in that they gave standardized tests of post-traumatic stress disorder before the treatment and after the treatment, and the results were astounding. That after one session, these children who had for years had the symptoms of PTSD, which included flashbacks and nightmares and can't sleep and bedwetting and withdrawal and aggression and all of the symptoms that come with PTSD.
Right.
After one session, the symptoms went away, the behaviors went away, their test scores went like more than almost 90% of them no longer were in the PTSD category.
Fantastic.
And that was after one session. And then a year later, they did a follow-up to see whether it held, and it held. It was like not more than 90%. Now we're better, but it turns out that from a research point of view, they cheated because after learning the tapping, it became part of the culture of the orphanage. So a boy would wake up in the middle of the night screaming with a nightmare, and his three bunkmates would gather around and have him tap down his anxiety after the nightmare. It was used all the time in the orphanage. So we don't really know if the results held after the 1 year because of the one session or because it was used that way. But some different schools and homes for emotionally disturbed children have been applying this, and it's very effective. It's extremely effective with children.
That's a wonderful story, and regardless, it was beneficial in whichever direction they took with it.
Yes.
That is a lovely, lovely story to hear. So now that we understand that this is really hands-on, can you talk a little bit more about how people can actually use this as a self-help basis? And I understand that there's a guide that you also have as part of your books that people can maybe refer to.
Yes, there are a lot of ways to learn this. I think a really good way is to pay attention to what's in your local community and find someone that's offering a course. Our book, Promise of Energy Psychology, has been reviewed as a very both sophisticated but extremely user-friendly introduction to energy psychology. Along with it, there's a 4-hour DVD program that gets people into it. So those are all ways of doing it. Then there are a number of organizations such as EFTUniverse.com and ACEP, which is EnergyPsych.org, which give trainings in how to learn this technique more at a professional level, but also can be taken by lay people to simply learn the technique. So there's a range, but more and more, every local community seems to have someone teaching this now. If in a fairly large city, there you can find it. We have some resources up on our website. I'll be doing I don't get to teach this too much at the beginner's level, but I will be doing one in September at the Omega Institute, a 5-day class at Omega Institute in upstate New York. I'll be doing a 5-day class in September. And
we will certainly be giving out websites and all of that, so stay tuned because you definitely want to look into all of these upcoming events. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it's very accessible for people. I think that the Promise of Energy Psychology combined with the DVD is a really nice way for people to just dive into it for learning it on a self-help basis, and that's available from our website, which is EnergyPsychEd.com, Energy, PSYCHED.com, and there's actually right now across the website we're doing a special where if people write in Holiday 10 in their coupon code, they get a 30% discount, which is a very large
on that
discount.
One. Yes.
Yeah. So but there are a lot of ways to learn it. I think finding another way to learn it is to take a problem that you have and find an EFT or other energy psychology practitioner and have a few sessions with them. By having those sessions, you will really pick up the technique very quickly.
That is correct. And then you have tools for life, listeners. This is by far one of the easiest methods that you will probably encounter. Once you really learn it, it becomes second nature, and it's simplistic and it is cost effective. It's all of those great things, and it moves you forward faster than what you could possibly imagine when it comes to the issues that we discussed today that were anxiety-based primarily, but coping with even the most severe stressors in your life as well. I would like to thank you so very much, Dr. Feinstein, for your participation today and for sharing with all of us your wisdom and knowledge about this ever-growing and powerful field of energy psychology.
It has been a pleasure, Aileen. Thank you so much.
I am thrilled, and I hope that you can join us again in the future. And as for all of you listeners, I invite you to seek out Dr. Feinstein and attend one of his workshops, as well as looking into the website where you can look at all of these books and packages, energypsyched.com. And the package that he was referring to was the Intro to Energy Psychology package. Do look for it, especially now for the holidays when there are those specials online. And I want to add that in terms of your workshops, if I may, his lovely partnership in marriage and work with Dr. Donna Eden, who is the guru in energy medicine, make the learning experience so very entertaining. So look out for that September presentation. That I'm sure would be worthwhile and much, much more. In fact, I refer to the two of you in private as the dynamic duo, so by all means. So do go to energypsyched.com for further information, for workshops, and for his books. And I will leave you with a thought for today. We will discover the nature of our particular genius when we stop trying to conform to our own or to other people's models, learn to be ourselves, and allow our natural channels to open. And that is by Dr. Shakti Gawain. And the music you are listening to at the beginning and ending of my show is composed by the young and talented Aaron Sundy. Please email me if you have any interest in his music at Aileen Neely at AileenNeelyTherapies.com. And we will be back live on January 7 when I will be sharing with all of you the philosophy behind my book,